Today I'm going to talk about the low carbohydrate diet for weight loss. Is it just a fad? Is it just a passing fancy? We're going to talk about the history of the science of obesity and how the low carb diet can help you lose weight. It's coming right up. The art of medicine is very peculiar. Once in a while, medical treatments become established that are not particularly effective, but through sheer inertia just become the standard of care, often for decades. For example, the use of bleeding, even for wounds, leeches, eating mummies, and more recently, arthroscopy has been shown to be not particularly effective, and angioplasty for stable coronary disease. But these treatments have been used for many, many years without much evidence that they actually work. And the same is true for the calorie-restricted low-fat diet. It's been recommended for many decades, since the 1970s, with really minimal evidence that it actually works. There was no randomized controlled trials that showed that it was particularly effective, and the real world evidence really showed that it just didn't work at all. As soon as we introduced the low-fat, calorie-restricted diet as a standard treatment for obesity, the obesity epidemic just exploded, and people couldn't figure out how to lose weight. So it's often useful to look back into history and say, how did we get here? Because they actually did a lot better than we did at the treatment of obesity 100 years ago, which seems very strange, but is certainly true. The history of obesity treatment really goes back to a man named William Banting. In 1865, he had become rather overweight and he wanted to lose weight. So he tried all kinds of things. First, he tried to exercise more. So he started to row on the Thames River. He certainly got more fit, but he didn't lose any weight. He said that his hunger just overwhelmed him. He tried just restricting what he ate, but he was just hungry all the time. So he didn't know what to do. He talked to a French surgeon who said, well, let's get rid of this calorie counting and instead avoid certain foods that are more fattening than others. In particular, he avoided the sugars and the starches, the beer, sweet potatoes, and what we now call refined carbohydrates, so bread and potatoes, that kind of thing. It was so effective for his weight that he actually wrote a letter called the Letter of Corpulence addressed to the public in 1865. And that's really considered one of the first diet books ever published, close to 150 years ago. For the next 100 years, this would become standard medical practice. It wasn't something that was faddish, it was just the treatment for obesity. Dr. William Osler, in 1882, a very widely influential physician of his time, wrote a monograph called Obesity and Its Treatment. And in it, he stated that fatty foods were actually critical for weight loss because of their effect on satiety. That is, eating foods that have fat and protein make you full so that you don't eat and are not hungry for snacking and eating other things that might make you gain weight, such as those sugary snacks. In 1920, the Reader's Digest in the popular press said, the stout person must learn he has both friends and enemies at the table. The most prominent enemies to weight loss were sugar, bread, cereal, and desserts. So very much like William Banting said, cutting out the sugar and cutting out the refined carbohydrates. Standard medical textbooks for specialists, such as 1951's The Practice of Endocrinology, said to lose weight, there are certain foods you must avoid. Bread and everything else made of flour, Cereals such as breakfast cereals, potatoes, and other white root vegetables, foods containing sugar and all sweets. But it was not just calories that were restricted. It said that you can eat as much as you like of meat, fish, birds, green vegetables, eggs, cheese, and unsweetened fruits. So again, what we find is that the conventional wisdom says that it's not calories that makes you sick. Certain foods are more fattening than others, even if their calories are matched. In the 1960s, several standard books such as Dr. Spock's Baby and Child Care addressed weight gain in kids. And what he said was that rich desserts, the amount of plain starchy foods, cereals, bread, and potatoes, taken is what determines how much weight they gain or lose. That is, once again, getting away from calories to specific foods. In 1963, in the British Journal of Nutrition, it states plainly that every woman knows that carbohydrate is fattening. In the 1970s, everything changed. The government decided that dietary fat was in fact responsible for heart disease, and it couldn't have dietary fat being bad for you in that it caused heart disease, but good for you in that it kept off weight gain. So all of a sudden, without much scientific evidence, the consensus became that it wasn't certain foods that made you fat, it was the calories that made you fat. And since dietary fat is more dense in calories than other foods, therefore fat made you fat. A fact that had somehow escaped all common sense for the preceding hundreds of years. That's how we got this low-fat craze that went on through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, while the obesity epidemic continued unabated. Of course, by the 90s, people were getting tired of this, and that's where the Atkins diet became popular once again. And at that time, there was already an established movement for evidence-based medicine. So what we wanted to do was put it to the test. We didn't need to just rely on history. We could do studies and compare one diet to the next diet. And these randomized controlled trials showed over the next few decades that the low-carbohydrate diet, in fact, was far superior to the calorie-restricted diet in almost every way. Randomized control trials such as the Women's Health Initiative pointed out that restricting calories caused very little weight loss over 5 to 10 years. You could lose weight at first, but then you'd gain it back. If you compare all of these studies and put them together, you can take a look at what science actually says about the low-carbohydrate diet. The Public Health Collaboration in the UK put together all of these studies. There were 67 randomized controlled trials of low-carbohydrate diets in total. 2 found that they were equal for weight loss, but 57 found in favor of the low-carbohydrate diet compared to only 7. If you look at significant differences, it's 36 to 0. In terms of treatment for type 2 diabetes, the American Diabetes Association states plainly that the low-carbohydrate diet has more evidence behind it than any other diet. So we get back to our original question. Is the low-carbohydrate diet simply a fad? Hardly. It's actually the basis of all obesity medicine. It's been around for more than 150 years, so it can hardly be called a fad. It's sort of like saying brushing your teeth is just a fad. If we've been doing it for centuries, it's not really a fad. If we have more randomized controlled trial evidence, more scientifically based evidence backing the low-carbohydrate diet for both weight loss and type 2 diabetes, well, that needs to be considered the baseline. That's why I think it's important to look at the types of food that you're eating and not simply the calories, because the low carbohydrate diet and the hormonal theory of obesity really say that it's the types of calories that are important, not just the number of calories. When you take those calories, if they're carbohydrates versus proteins or fats, when they go into our bodies, they're going to have different hormonal effects. And that's going to give our body different instructions as to whether to gain fat or not. I hope you learned something. If you did, maybe share it with a friend. They might learn something as well. Thanks for watching. And if you could do me a favor, just hit that like button down below so that others can find this video. It'd be a real favor to me. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.